countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Live from the island of Misfit Toys, it is now time for the last comic shop! It's Charlie in the box!
That's right. We're opening up this shop to newbies to help them find their way underneath the comic book tent. I didn't realize the shop was moving. How are people going to find us if we're always moving? That's why you use the comic book finder, I guess.
There you go. And we're keeping the lights on for all those other Misfit toys. Be they shoot jelly. Oh, man.
It's a cowboy that rides an ostrich!
Man, he'd be good at joust.
He would be! That's seriously the first thing I thought of when I saw that as a kid. I'm like, he plays a lot of joust. He must. I'm the host of The Most, Danny Larson, and I'm joined by Chad Smith, who plays a lot of joust with me over the years. It's one of our favorite arcade games of all time. And J.A. Scott, who, I don't know, are you a big joust fan too, or did you never get into the joust?
I was, but it was not my favorite game. I was more the Deadly Discs of Tron.
That is a fun one. Did they play that with the trackball?
Trackball.
Yes. Trackball game.
Any of those trackball games, they were some of the best arcade games out there. I loved any time you would go to the arcade and they'd give you something other than the joystick, whether it was sitting in the cockpit for the Star Wars game, or like Excite Bike where you had to get on the bike.
Afterburner was like the first arcade game that I played that was you sat inside and it moved. Remember, it would go side to side and up and down a little bit as you were flying your F-14.
Right. Although I do remember the day that J.A. first played Daytona 500. And he was like, okay, fine. This is where my college tuition's going to go from now. Just going to play this. You want to race me? Because I want to race again. It was like crack for me. I just need to play some more than Daytona. It's fine. I don't have a problem. Sit down and race again.
Everyone loved that first track. The second track on Daytona was such crap.
I didn't even know they had other tracks. I just got schooled by you so much that I just walked away in utter disgust most of the time. But one thing that we also do on this show is read comic books, not just talk about arcade games or Christmas movies from years past. And on this week's show, we've got a great one for you. It says Promised. Because I think several shows ago, back when we were reviewing the Eisner Award winners, we said we were going to review this because it was an Eisner Award nominee. And that is J.A.'s pick, which is The Many Deaths of Laila Starr. We're not going to get to that one just yet because we've got some Christmas talk. Yes, as the holiday season continues to roll on here at the Last Comic Shop, we want to get into that Yuletide spirit. And so I thought that I would ask my co-hosts this week if they could go back to, their childhood and collect or revisit one of their favorite Christmas toys that they found underneath the Christmas tree one of those December 25th. What would it be? And we're going to go ahead and start off with J.A. Scott. So, J.A., what was a ghost of Christmas past that you would want to revisit?
The question is toy, because the Christmas that I remember the most is the Christmas that I got a new dashboard for my Saab. And anyone who has a Saab 900 or had a Saab 900 knows what a big deal it is when you get I got a completely new dashboard without any cracks, which was rare on a 900. It was going into my 88 SPG. And my dad had wrapped the old dashboard, but he had put all these other bits of wood in it, so it made it look like it was not the shape of the dashboard. And then he told me that it was a mop from my mom.
I'm loving this.
Then when I opened it, I was like, wait a minute, this isn't a mop. Is this a dashboard? But it's my... And then you could just see the gears clicking, because my car had been at the shop. And my father said, oh, sorry, I couldn't pick your car up today. They didn't get to it. But in reality, they were taking the old dashboard, putting in the new dashboard, and that was the start of the Saab Stealth 2.0 when my SPG got repainted and cleaned up and everything. So that's probably my most memorable Christmas. Toy-wise, I would have to go with, there was 2 years where you, Andrew, and I both got the same toy from our aunt.
Yeah, I
and
do.
It was, we had, one year it was, we both got G.I. Joe Havocs.
Right. Which is a badass toy. It doesn't make a lick of sense. It's on tracks.
No.
And it's got like that...
The hover car.
Car thing, and yeah.
I mean, the pilot lies down on his belly and to drive this thing, and it's a tank with these big guns, but yet the canopy is all glass, so he wouldn't survive very long if he was in a battle. And the other year, and this is probably the toy I'm thinking of the most, was the Turtle Van.
Yes, the party van.
Turtle party van with the swing out door.
Right! I did like the Havoc a lot more than the party van, but I do have fond memories, because that was the year they bought stock in Playmates that year, because we got, like, the sewer base and, like, a bunch of other Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle figures. It was the final days of the toy era for us, and so, like, that was our final farewell to childhood, was getting those Ninja Turtles. Chad?
So this is a tough one, because I can remember unwrapping, like, He-Man toys and Castle Grayskull, and I remember getting the 3-packs of the Marvel Secret Wars toys, and those were all great. But the story that springs to mind is the one year where I was like, oh, man, Santa forgot something. And it was, I don't know if you guys remember, the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Nintendo game.
Okay.
Which I got the first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Nintendo game back in the days when the arcade game was out. And I just didn't understand in my 8-year-old brain or 9-year-old brain that they were going to be totally different games. And so couldn't imagine my disappointment with that first Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle game where it's like, wait a minute, this is not what I expected at all. And so fast forward, it might have been a year or two, they released the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle arcade game for Nintendo. And that was the one thing on my list that I was like, oh man, I can't wait till Santa brings that. I can't wait till Santa brings that. We had in my family, we would do gifts at both sets of grandparents' house. We'd do presents on Christmas morning at my house, go through all that. And I got tons of great stuff, but I was spoiled rotten, but I was still like, oh man, Santa missed the one that I wanted, and like, it's like, the magic is like, it's just torn up just a little bit. And sure enough, we went to my Aunt Norma's house, and she's like, oh, Santa left something here for you. And it was that Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle game. And it was like, oh, the magic is real. Like, it just restored all of my faith and all of that stuff.
So it was like, it was your Red Ryder BB gun. It was behind the piano the whole time.
Exactly. It was hiding at Aunt Norma's house. That's one that sticks with me. Just, it just reinforced like, no, of course Santa wouldn't forget that. I mean, come on, he's Santa.
Yeah. Well, my Christmas memory is actually one of my earliest memories from a Christmas. It was the Christmas of 1982, like 3 or 4 years old, probably. And I just have memories of this was the first year that Masters of the Universe was a thing. And my parents were ahead of the curve because that Christmas they went to some place and they got a Castle Grayskull for me. This was before Castle Grayskull was a thing, before the cartoon show, before everything. It was just like, this was just another toy. And so they got this, and it came with Battle Cat, and it came with 4 figures. J.A., which 4 figures do you think it came with? You were there. I don't know if you remember, but you were there. Which 4 figures did it come with?
He-Man, Teela,
okay.
Skeletor,
no, go ahead.
Man-at-Arms.
No. It came with He-Man and Teela, and it came with Stratos, the Winged Warrior, and it came with Beastman. Beastman was your bad guy. So, like, when I first started playing with Masters of the Universe, I didn't even know of Skeletor. It wasn't until months later that my dad took me to a service merchandise, and I got my first Skeletor. And even then, I was just like, who's this guy? He's all blue, and he's got a skull face. I don't get it. And then it turns out it was Skeletor, and he was a big deal. But for me, like Beastman, yeah, that was the guy. That was the guy. He was the real bad one. He was the bad one.
Actually, one of the better He-Man action figures because he had the furry orange hair.
Yeah.
That was the one nice thing about all the I mean, in later years, it got a bit much, but each one of them always had a little gimmick, like Stinkor.
I was gonna say Beastman was
patchouli
no
oil.
Mossman,
No, Mossman was great.
which was just Beastman, flocked green,
Dipped in
Yeah.
pine slaw. Still my favorite ones. They're always the ones that like are kind of weird, but like not too weird. Like Triclops. I love Triclops. He's awesome. Manny Faces. Awesome.
I think I might have played with Cobra Khan the most because he was the guy that had the squirter.
Yes.
He was the constant tub companion. Like you always
Right.
had.
Isn't there like an elephant head one?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Snout Spout.
Yes.
Originally, it was called Hose Head, and then they thought that was dirty.
There you go.
And so I just remember that. Getting in on the ground floor of Masters of the Universe, and it has spawned my love of Masters of the Universe since. I could have talked about the fact that I got like that Sega Master System that one year when I really wanted a Nintendo, and they tried to play it off that they were like, yeah, it's got 3D glasses and a much cooler light gun, and it had better graphics, but like nobody was playing it. So like I was just like the only person in town that couldn't trade games with anybody because I had.
And it came with 2 built-in games that took us like an hour and a half to figure out that they were built into the system. It's a great game.
We tore up the living room looking for this cartridge, and it turns out it was actually in the system the whole time. It was Hang On. And J.A. played the hell out of Hang On. Again, back to the whole driving thing. J.A. just likes driving stuff. He's a Ryan Gosling in Drive. Anyways. So, yeah, those are our holiday stories. Hope you all enjoyed them. We'll be right back with more Last Comic Shop after these commercial breaks. Make sure that you leave us comics out on our Twitter page at Last Comic Shop. What was one of your favorite Christmas gifts as a youngin'?
Do you like comic books? Do you like comic book movies and TV shows? How about movie and TV reviews? If I just described you, good news! You can get all of the movie and TV reviews you're looking for with a good dose of witty banter and fun thrown into the mix by checking out Paperweight Entertainment. Join Derek and Ian every Friday for TV reviews on the Paperweight Entertainment podcast, and join Ian and Colonel Bob every Wednesday for the Silver Screen Scoundrel movie reviews. Find out more information about both shows at paperweightentertainment.com.
Cartoon Dumpster Dive. I'm your host, Joel. And I'm your host, Andrew. Join us as we travel back in time to watch the garbage cartoons from your past. Will you remember them? Maybe.
We painstakingly watch every episode of these cartoons to remind you that, hey, some things belong in the past.
Our pain is your entertainment. Thanks for tuning in.
All right, we're back with more of the Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for our Read Pile Review. Yes, that time of every single show where we're going to talk about death, because that's real festive. Hey, it's
season.
Tis the season for making sure that you remember those that have passed before. Well, there you go. Yeah, why not? Hey, it's getting close to the new year, and old acquaintance be forgot and all that other stuff, and the old lang synes. Yeah, that's happening too. But in any case, we're going to talk about many deaths. Many deaths of Laila Starr on this week's show. It's J.A.'s pick, and like a lot of Read Pile reviews that we've done on other shows, this actually was birthed out of a recommendation way back in the day. J.A. was like, I read this book, and it was awesome. And I was just like, okay, well, let's read that as a group. So, Chad, who did The Many Deaths of Laila Starr?
Okay, so this was a 5-issue miniseries coming out of Boom Studios, published originally in 2021. And so it's written by Rom V, with art by Felipe Amdrade, color assists by Inez Amaro, letters by Anworld Designs.
And this was up for, Best Limited Series at the 2022 Eisners, and it lost to, it lost to Good Asian, which we also reviewed on this particular show.
Which was also a pick of mine.
Yeah.
Look at you! It's almost like you know something about comic books once in a while.
Surprisingly.
Well, you have it on this podcast, and do you know a lot about this comic book? Let's see if you do with the 10-cent synopsis.
So, Laila Starr is a incarnation of death who is kicked out of the heaven or where the gods live basically because they get sick of her. Because somebody else wants her corner office. And there's a lot of office politics going on with the gods. Death comes down to Earth essentially to kill a baby who's going to grow up and discover the cure to death and make all humans immortal. Okay. And you get this moment in the first issue where she's holding the baby, and it's literally the, what would you do if you could kill Hitler when he was a baby, or kill some horrible person in life? But it's the baby, it's not the grown adult, and she can't do it. And then what you get is 5 issues of sort of her going through watching this baby Darius grow up to be a boy, and then a man, and then an older man, and she dies a lot. Kind of because she's clumsy, but also because every time she dies, she comes back and she learns a little bit, and the god of life is bringing her back. And apparently, towards the end, he's like, I had to give up a little things. I don't have access to the copy machine anymore. And ultimately, it's a story of sort of, what's the point of life, and immortality and death and life. It's a very nice story, I thought. Okay. That's the 10-cent synopsis.
There you go. One thing that I wanted to say is when I first picked up this book, I was amazed by the colors. You know what the book reminded me of? And I had to see whether or not it was done by the same color artist. It reminded me of the colors I used to see in Paper Girls. Remember how in Paper Girls they used really
a lot of purples and
pastels.
Blues.
Yeah, pinks, and
the blues were not true blues. They were more like a pastel blue. It was very a light touch on some of these things. Usually that's JA's MO, is to immediately go to the color palette. But that was the first thing I thought when I saw this. I was just like, ooh, this color palette is something different. Now, I've got some other thoughts about this particular book, one of which is it's a book that needs a lot of unpacking. Like, I got what eventually this book was about, but I can't lie that by the end of it, I was kind of like, what did I just do? Because, I'm not going to give away how the book ends, because I think you should read it. But when I got to the end of issue 5, I was like, oh, that was it? That was all that this many deaths of Laila Starr led to? Is that? And I don't know, guys. Maybe you can help me unpack it. What did you guys think?
Like going on a trip, sometimes it's the journey, not the destination, that makes it worthwhile. And I think that the many deaths of Laila Starr is a comic book sort of embodiment of that. It's more about Laila's journey and what she goes through trying to figure out how to kill this person or not kill this person or get back to heaven, or dealing with the fact that she's been death for so long. It feels very much like the writer was maybe going through a journey of himself, dealing with death. I think sort of the overall plot is quite simple and simplistic, but that to say that would also sort of take away from how beautifully it's told.
Okay. I think that's right in some respects, just simply because, again, it's not really it's in part about this guy that develops immortality, but that's kind of like a MacGuffin that they kind of just push to the side after a while. I mean, heck, it's in a shoebox and you don't even see what it is. It's like the gold briefcase in Pulp Fiction. Like, what's in there? Like, and maybe that's what it's about, is this person that was death learning what death really is. Maybe it's going from an abstract thing to even death, who's, supposed to be the embodiment of it, to something that's like more concrete, as she sees the life of this one guy unfold. And at the end, spoiler alert, even he dies.
I think it's actually more, or at least for me, it was more that it was her teaching this Darius character, why death is so important. And death at one point I think I drove him to create immortality and put me out of a job. But then, at the end, there's that poetry, that poetic moment where things, come full circle. But for me, I enjoyed this quite a bit. I really did love the art. The Felipe Amdrade art is something I would never say no to a Felipe Amdrade book. But I worried parts of this were too cool for me. It's like having that conversation with the people that are way cooler than you are, and it's like, oh, I don't belong in this conversation. I'm just gonna go over there. Like when they're talking about how, you know, life is like a cigarette, it's meant to be smoked, and like, fuck you.
No, I won't lie. I'm going to say it was at moments a little borderline pretentious to that point. It was like coffee shop existential stuff. But I feel like there is a counterbalance to that. So I'm not going to completely dismiss that as just like, oh, let's go and sit around and talk about Sartre and discuss the Metamorphosis and Camus and all that other stuff. You know,
right. And honestly, like I would dig some of that like more. And so I feel bad because it was very well done. You know, but there were just little ticks that personally, like when I got to them, I'd just be like, oh no, this sucks. And it wasn't anything to do with the quality of the book. It was just my personal reaction to it. And so I worry on this one. You guys are going to judge me because it was okay.
My question is, and we didn't. She dies, I think, in every issue. She dies like 6 times. I mean, she walks in front of a bus, dies in the fire of the Chinese temple. I think she falls out of a building at one point.
And life keeps bringing her back.
Obviously, that's I don't want to say a gimmick, but that's, you know, sort of the one of the driving factors to push the story forward. But do you think that there's more to a point than that? Just that she's brought back? Is she meant to learn every time she's done?
Yeah, I agree with that. I honestly, it's going to go hand in hand with my recommendation later on. And a spoiler alert for that, I'm going to recommend The Christmas Carol. And I really feel like this was kind of like, in some ways, Death's Christmas Carol. I seriously think that God was trying to teach her a lesson. Maybe a lesson in humility, maybe a lesson in how her role actually impacts the universe. Maybe it has become abstract. Maybe she's been doing it for so long that it becomes like, yeah, I'm just doing this thing. It's going to be perfectly fine for me to kill this baby because, like, I kill lots of people. And then when she actually has to do it, and I guess somebody brings it up, she's like, yeah, you're going to have mortal thoughts now. Like, that's going to change your perspective on what people do. It's like losing somebody that you love. And in death, it's no longer an abstract. It's like, no, that means it has meaning to me now. Like, I understand what it is.
Right. You can't have life without death. When you lose that balance, things stop mattering. All that stuff, blah, 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 blah. But what got me was how every time she would die, they'd be like, oh, it's 8 years later. The only thing that would change would be the character of Darius. Everything else still looked exactly the same. Like, there was no adjustment in the timeline. There was nothing done to make it feel like, oh, it's been 12 years since the last death of Laila Starr. Oh, it's been 26 years since the last death, other than Darius is older now.
Yeah.
And, like, there weren't things of that time. I felt like that was a missed opportunity to play with some of those cultural things as death learns why death is so important.
So the other question I had is, like, if she lost her job, like, was nobody dying? Because, like, she wasn't there anymore, right? So, like, did nobody die for, like, 80 years? Like, nobody was dead. Like, nobody. And, like...
Well, I like, got the sense that not so much that people weren't dying, is that she was really... They're more like paper pushers. They're like these people that work at the IRS, and they're just, you know, taking the file here and moving it there, taking the file there, moving it here. Maybe not the IRS. Don't come after me for taxes.
But yeah, there were still funerals and stuff. So right. I imagine people were dying in a conventional sense. It's just a different meeting, or maybe they had a temp in the job.
It was one of my favorite issues of this entire series. It was actually the second issue. That was the one that meant the most to me. And it was the story about when Darius was a young boy. There was a worker that came to his house, and you could tell that, I don't know if his parents were too busy for him or whatever, but he really bonded with this worker. He said he was like, it was almost like he was made of the earth. Kind of reminded me of like Ben Grimm or something, the Iron Giant or something. Somebody from, you know, when you're a kid and you see somebody that's really tall and whatever, they seem like they dwarf the sun, because they're so big to you. And this person was looked down upon because of the culture that maybe he was one of the, do they still have that in India with
the caste system?
the caste system. I guess that's where they were going with that. And he dies, and so Darius runs away to see his funeral. And it is true, like, death does show up every single time he loses somebody. And that becomes a trope.
And also, I mean, there's Ram V's writing. There's some great dialogue. So I think it's one of the stories. She's been smoking cigarettes, and she dies, obviously, a couple of times. And then the god of life offers her a cigarette towards the end of one issue, after he's just brought her back. And she's like, no, those things will kill you.
No, there was another good line right at the beginning when they first sack Death and they send her back down to Earth, and she's like, oh, somebody else wants my corner office. It's taxes, isn't it? It's taxes. And I was just like, oh, the Death and the taxes. Yeah, I mean, it's clever. I'm struggling. When I first went into this book, when you were explaining it to me, J.A., about she's lost this job and whether she can go down to Earth and kill this child, and I just thought it was going to be something different than we ultimately got. At the end of the day, I think it was about, like, acceptance of death as a part of natural life, and I still don't get the ending. And again, I keep on alluding to it, and I'm not going to spoil it, but I didn't find the ending was very satisfying, in my opinion. I don't know what I was looking for, but Death came to live with him for a while.
I loved the ending. I thought this was a perfect 5 issues. You know, you're tired of the sign of superhero comics, and you need a break from all of that. You want to read something that's really well written, beautifully drawn, lovely colors, a nice encapsulated story. Yes, you might need to smoke a cigarette or two. Yes, you might need to go to the coffee shop and speak with the exchange students who are much cooler than you. Can wear those skinny jeans and actually pull it off.
Oh, those skinny jeans. F them.
I did want to say, though, that I think even more than the Ram V writing in this, I really did enjoy a lot of the art. Again, the scene where she's drowning and there's just a bunch of hands that come up and pull her underwater. I thought that was a great visual. There were a couple times when the visuals really captured me. And I was wondering whether you guys had any particular moments that you felt this book was powerful from a visual standpoint.
Well, it's just Andrade he's so great with faces. There's so much emoting going on in the faces here. And he's one of those artists that's, he's okay to take things to that abstract level. It does a good job of tugging at the appropriate strings that it wants to tug at. It's just anytime people are laughing or smiling or scowling, you can really feel it every time. He's so good at that kind of stuff.
I think it's less one, like, wow panel or page, and more just a culmination of all of them coming together, because he doesn't have a lot of single page panels. I mean, there'll be some pages where it's like a half page panel or a 3/4 page panel, but there's not a lot of spreads. There are a lot of panels where there's no word bubbles or thought bubbles or text, and it's just usually Laila Starr reacting to something or thinking, and you feel like you're inside her head. You can see what she's going through or what she's dealing with.
To that point, again, one of my favorite exchanges is it comes in issue 4 where Darius first confronts Death. He figures out who Laila Starr is, and he's like, oh, you always come when people die in my life. You came when my friend died when I was real little. You came when my other friend died when I was in my 20s. Now you come when my wife dies. And you always come after they have passed. And there's just this scene where he grabs her by the shoulders, and the colors, he's completely charcoal gray, and he's got red eyes, and he actually looks more like Death. The lack of color, the lack of emotion, the lack of anything. And he's grabbing her, who's almost like full of like vibrant pink. So it's like a flip-flopping of the roles. And so those were kind of the things that I caught from this particular book.
My question is, was it like a Fight Club thing where we think it's Laila Starr dying and it's important people in Darius's life that are actually the ones being hit by the cars or burned in the buildings?
Oh.
No, I think it is really Laila Starr, but other people are dying at the same time as Laila Starr. My question was, I think it's interesting that they cast Laila Starr as a 16-year-old. So usually when you're that age, you're a teenager, life is nothing but in front of you. So young, so vibrant, so not ready for the life that is coming to us.
And to juxtapose that with somebody that's literally been around for eternity, since things started to die.
But yet also not in touch with any of it.
Right.
Because that's another thing, right? When you're 16, you think that you're immortal. You can't die, right? You're a teenager.
Right,
Nothing
yeah.
can hurt you. Everything you feel is like 211, right? The first time you fall in love, it's 211. The first time you break up with someone, it's 211.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, everything is so huge, and you're not looking 5 feet in front of your face because everything is just of that moment.
Yeah, some deep stuff going on with Laila Starr, and we will be right back after these commercial breaks with our ratings. And stay tuned.
It's getting deep in here.
You need some boots.
Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
They make the sound by vigorously rubbing their penis on their abdomen.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my gosh. Then at night, they come out and crawl around your face and mate with each other.
Oh.
But
Sorry,
get this.
I would like to sleep tonight. As naturalists, let's face it, we find something dead, we go and we poke it with a stick. I did that with the deer like 3 weeks ago.
As you do. Rachel, no. You weren't paying attention. Blood and mucus.
Oh, right. Sorry.
All right, this episode is going off the rails.
This is the quality content people come here for.
Strange by Nature podcast was chosen as one of the best science podcasts of 2021. Come join the fun wherever you find your podcasts.
All right, we're back with more of The Last Comic Shop, and it is now time for our ratings. Yes, it is the Christmas and holiday season, and we're going to unpack some ratings for you. Jay is going to give us a present. It's a 1 out of 4 scale, like he oftentimes does. Hopefully, we won't regift it. But yeah, what is our rating scale this week?
Well, this was the many deaths of Laila Starr, so it goes to say, how many deaths are you giving this book?
All right.
More deaths does not mean bad things, because obviously every time Laila Starr dies, she learns something when she comes back. So
Yeah. Well, wouldn't that be nice, though, if you could, like, learn
give somebody
something?
death?
Well, no, like, if you could die and then come back and then be like, I'll load up my save game and make sure that I jump this time.
Well, I'm sure Chad will agree. He probably died a little bit after watching Batman versus Superman, Dawn of Justice.
Not as much as Man of Steel.
There you go. All right, well, Chad's going to go first. How many deaths are you giving this, Chad?
This is a challenge because the art is beautiful. The story is a fine story. And my biggest problem I have with it is that Rom V is cooler than me, and I don't like it. So, as a result, I'm going to give him a 2.75 because at the end of the day, I don't know how satisfied I was with this story. And the worst part is, and we'll get to this in recommendations, it just kept reminding me of other stories that have like similar themes or similar veins that I like so much better. Like, there are lines in here that are just too cool for school. Like when the one girl is breaking up with Darius and she's like, life's too short to live without a broken heart. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, there's just so many parts of this book that just rub me the wrong way. So while it's a quality work, I'm sticking with 2.75 deaths that we could all learn from and hopefully find something better on the other side.
Yeah. I mean, isn't this in some ways like almost the same story as Daybreaker or whatever? Or
yeah, we'll get to that.
Okay. I was wondering if that might be a recommendation around the corner, because that has people dying and then coming back and telling stories. Anyways, I'll go next. Since this was J.A.'s book, he can go last. I'm also going to give it slightly higher, like a 2.85. Tenth of a percentile, but still a little bit closer to a 3 than a 2. I do agree with Chad. I found this pretentious at times, but there were some issues I really loved. I think it had a lot of promise to it, in terms of issue 1 and 2. I really enjoyed those. By issue 3, where Darius starts becoming a teenager and a douchebag, and that whole thing with the cigarette, I was just like, I don't got any time for this. And the fact that she keeps dying at the end, but she's the only person dying, I'm like, As I mentioned before, I think God's just screwing with her, trying to teach her a lesson. And I get the last issue, but then I don't get the last issue. Something about this just seemed it was an Eisner nominee book. This is like going and seeing The Piano when really you just wanted to watch another episode of the Fast and Furious franchise, right? I just wanted to be entertained, and I don't know if I was in the mood this holiday season for a book this deep. So maybe it just hit me at the wrong time. But J.A. did broaden my horizons, and I appreciate that. And I like the fact that it was not based in America. Like, that was the nicest thing about this entire book, was I was actually getting a different culture and a different way that they look at death, and not like a god that looked like the god that I knew, but, you know, the god with the multi faces and kind of more
There's
of
many gods, not just one.
Yeah.
God of life is different than the god that fired her.
Right. So I appreciate the fact that it opened my mind to that kind of thing. But yeah. Jay, what did you think?
Let me put my cigarette out, turn off my John Coltrane, A Love Supreme that's playing in the background, because me and Rob V are hanging out talking philosophy. You guys are both wrong. You're just wrong on this. I'm sorry. I was actually going to give it like a 3.75. I didn't think it was quite a 4 book, but you guys skewed so low that I have to go 4 just so the average comes up, because you're wrong on it. Everyone should read it. It definitely was an Eisner contender. The art is beautiful. The writing is witty and careful. The ending actually made me choke up a little bit. It's a very nice mini-series, 5 issues run. It's just enough. It's not giving you too much. It's not padding. It takes you through this man's life, Darius's life, as told by Laila Starr, and the many deaths. And I will point out, Andrew, you're wrong. Every time she dies, somebody else has died previous to her. And then she dies and restarts the next book, essentially.
Yeah, but she's the only person that dies in that fire. And then she's the only...
She died in the
temple when the temple collapses?
Yes, because the temple was around, and then when the old man died...
Yeah, the caretaker.
The temple collapsed. The caretaker died, then the temple collapsed.
On her! She just happened to be in it.
Yes,
yeah, that's why I think it still might be a Fight Club thing.
The caretaker died. So I am giving it 4 deaths.
Okay, that's fine. I knew that you were going to. I will say it does remind me a lot of a JA movie selection, a JA book, and it's fine.
Yeah, what's wrong with the piano? There's nothing wrong with the piano.
There's nothing wrong. You're right.
You just don't like seeing Harvey Keitel's jump.
Does anybody?
Do expand our minds. You do challenge us as readers, JA, so I appreciate that. And hopefully we challenge your mind here this holiday season with our recommendations. Yes, it's this time of this show where we can give you some last-minute Christmas gifts that you might want to pick up for one of those comic book lovers in your life. Get out to your local comic book shop. Support those local businesses. Pick up some of the great books today for somebody in your life that loves the funny books. So, yeah, we're going to go ahead and start off with JA. JA, do you have another book that will expand our minds?
I hope so. I am recommending Mooncakes by Wendy Xu, Suzanne Walker, and Jomette Gill. This came out in 2019. You can get it in paperback or available on Comixology. It's a graphic novel. And it's the story of love and demons and a family that's got witchcraft in New England. This girl is growing up as she works in her grandmother's bookshop that has this special back room where you can get the special books. And somebody comes in and asking for like this occult analysis book, and they open up the back room and like there are books that are flying because it's a book on like witchcraft and flying.
One of those rooms?
No, not one of those.
The braided beads? No, I'm
So she goes up on the ladder to grab the book, and the book next to her starts biting her. She's like, "Stop that!" And so then she finds out that there's a white wolf that's been spotted in the woods, and she finds out that this is her friend who is growing up and, former lover. And so their feelings are rekindled against this witchcraft, and there's some dark forces in the woods that are attacking, and they need to fight it. And it's just like a heartwarming tale. It's beautifully told. It's New England in the fall, so you get these beautiful colors, and not unlike The Many Deaths of Laila Starr, a nice, compact, single story, as opposed to needing to know this massive mythology of stuff that came before it, or a giant sprawling universe. So for those who are less inclined to the hero stuff, or just need a break from the MCU, the DCU, Marvel, DC, I recommend Mooncakes.
Okay. Yeah, and the art is a little bit, I would use the word quirky, which is nice. Like, it's different. I don't think you're going to get that particular type anywhere else. Speaking of great books with interesting art, my recommendation this week is another one of those books that's adapted into a comic book. Like, we've talked about that a lot on our show. It's something that we really love to do because, again, I feel like it opens up that comic book tent to so many other folks that don't know that the illustrated medium is a wonderful way to get some of these great stories. Again, whether you go back and revisit our reviews of, Slaughterhouse 5 or 1984 or Dune, House Atreides, which is another great one.
Probably the best version of that piece of novel.
As opposed to The Star Wars.
Right. But this particular selection goes way back to the roots of that idea. Back in the 1950s, the comic book legend, Harvey Kurtzman, who you might know as one of the creative forces behind Mad Magazine. Some people say it was Bill Gaines. Other people just give all of the credit to Harvey Kurtzman because he was the editor. But long story short, Harvey had a lot to do with Mad Magazine getting off the ground, as well as other great war books like Two-Fisted Tales, which is great. If you ever have an opportunity to track down some Two-Fisted Tales EC collections in hardback, I really recommend that. But Kurtzman wanted to branch out into doing real graphic novels at a time in the 1950s where comic books were still looked as something for kids, or in fact actually as something that was almost un-American. We're talking about the time that Seduction of the Innocent came out. But that did not deter Kurtzman from drawing a ton of thumbnails for his adaptation of A Christmas Carol. He wanted to take the Charles Dickens classic and make it into a real book, the drawings and so forth that he could then put out in real bookstores. He couldn't find anybody that was a backer for it, and long story short, it fell apart, and he died many years later without that dream being fulfilled. Luckily for us, though, nowadays, there are tons of ways that you can get graphic novels, and given that there are folks that want to read them, Comixology Originals put out an adaptation of his original vision. So you can get a great book called Marley's Ghost, which is based on the original Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens and adapted by Harvey Kurtzman. It was an Eisner Award winner. Although it's not all of Kurtzman's art, it was based on all of his original drawings, and it was basically done by Gideon Kendall, Josh O'Neill, and Shannon Wheeler, using Kurtzman's original thumbnails as the creative inspiration. It's almost like they filled in the blanks, like one of those things where it's like a lost novel and they came in and they finished it. But if you're a fan of The Christmas Carol, which, again, this holiday season, you might be watching those movies. I know my dad was a huge, huge fan. He tried to watch every single adaptation of A Christmas Carol he could find because he just loved that story. And it's so timeless, with Scrooge learning to be not so much a miser and finding the goodwill and peace of men in his heart. And it's a wonderful adaptation in comic book form. It's probably the best one that I've ever read. So if you have an opportunity to track down Marley's Ghost, I would highly recommend it. Chad?
Okay, so in the spirit of Laila Starr, who dies and keeps coming back and learning, I'm going to take some recommendations that I've given out before. They're going to come back, and then we're going to keep learning.
You're great gifting! You are gifting, sir!
So anyway...
Call a spade! You are giving us old gifts.
They're just as good. So if you enjoyed the Felipe Amdrade-ness of this story, I recommend you go back to the What If, which we did a show on. The What If Magic became Sorcerer Supreme, which spilled over into Doctor Strange The End for some wonderful Felipe Amdrade art, and a really touching story about magic basically taking over that portion of the Marvel Universe from Doctor Strange there. If you are into stories where death helps people to learn things, another book I've recommended is Gil March's Carmen, which deals with some heavy themes, where there's a young lady who commits suicide and then is accompanied by death, and she goes and learns all these different lessons, Christmas Carol style, but it has some beautiful art. Warning, in addition to the themes, the rest of it is, there's lots of nudity and things that aren't for the kids in that one. But Carmen was a beautiful work that I thought dealt with some of those themes really well. And then finally, the big one, and this is something I know I've recommended before, and I'm going to try to get us to make a show about it, is Moon and Ba's Day Tripper, which Andy alluded to earlier. Day Tripper is what The Many Deaths of Laila Starr wants to be. It is poetic. It is beautiful. It has the lessons learned, and just in such a way. It's a 10-issue series that came out of Vertigo, and it is just some of the best comic booking. And so I highly recommend that for anybody that if you think you enjoyed The Many Deaths of Laila Starr, you owe it to yourself to check out Day Tripper, which does involve someone dying and over again. And yeah, there's actual metaphors and stuff in this one, though. It's a lot better in my mind.
Well, that will be my Christmas gift to you, Chad. In 2023, I promise that we will take one of our wonderful 52 weeks to cover Day Tripper on this show. So that is my promise to you. So make sure that you're tuning in next year, and you can do that by going out to our website, www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. Terrific place where you can rate, review, and subscribe so you don't miss any of our shows in 2023, because we are going to be around for another year, folks. We've got all these great books lined up. You want to know some of the books we got lined up in the month of January? We got Tom King and Mitch Gerard's Mr. Miracle. We've got The Department of Truth by James Tynion IV. We've got Pulp by Ed Brubaker and Sean Phillips, and just tons more. That's just a sampling of some of the great stuff that we got coming up for you just after the new year. So make sure that you're out there. Rate, review, and subscribe. And if you like us, give us a Christmas gift this year by leaving some kind words. Again, you don't have to say it in terms of a review or a 5-star or whatever. Just say some nice things. And how can they find us in order to leave us some of those nice things, Chad?
Well, they can find us on the socials at Last Comic Shop, where you can interact with us. You can help spread the word about the show. You can also find some of those Golden Age covers to tuck in at night. You can find the weekly polls that Jay puts up. You can find what books we're recommending and what books we bought at the comic shop that particular week. But all that and more is at Last Comic Shop on Twitter and Instagram. And if you need help finding that, you can always go back to home base, the www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com, where they can find what else, J.A.?
Well, we have a link to our merch store if you have any last-minute needs for your comic-loving friends or family members. Check out our merch store. We've got shirts, we've got tote bags, coffee mugs, our special Christmas version of the Last Comic Shop t-shirt logo with Santa Claus and some reindeer and Christmas star in the sky. And we always recommend, you can never go wrong with heather. Green heather, red heather. We're big fans of the heather t-shirt here.
Heather Locklear.
Heathers.
Heather Graham. She was the best part of Swingers.
So money she doesn't even know it.
That's right.
Yeah, so you can find stuff on the website, and while we may be the Last Comic Shop podcast, we hope you need, we don't actually want to be the Last Comic Shop, so we encourage everybody to get out there, find a shop near you where you can find things like moon cakes in case you love demons and New England. Or maybe you want to go online to Comixology for some of their originals like Marley's Ghost, which fulfills Harvey Kurtzman's dream of covering some of the Christmas Carol themes. Or maybe you want some of those recommendations I gave that just keep coming back. Things like Carmen, things like What If Magic became Sorceress Supreme and Doctor Strange to the End, or Day Tripper. All of that and more potentially waits for you at your local comic shop, so make sure you check it out.
All right. And until next week, when we have our Christmas show. That's right. The holiday season. And so we've got a Christmas show and then a New Year's show and our big New Year's wrap up. Chad's, he's been crunching the numbers. So make sure.
Crap.
Oh, you haven't been? Oh, man. Well, you start getting work on that. You got 2 weeks, buddy. Until then, I'm the host with the most, Andy Larson. I was joined by Chad Smith and J.A. Scott. And remember to stay safe, stay festive, and always remember to put bourbon in your eggnog this holiday season.
That's right, because the bourbon helps kill all that raw egg stuff. If you're making the eggnog from scratch. I assume everyone is doing, right?
Who does that? They sell it in a jug at the store. You just go and you buy the jug and then you add liquor to it.
You don't want to get sick at work and then taxes gets to take your corner office.
The Last Comic Shop was a 2022 Black Angus production.